안내 말씀드리겠습니다. 잠시 후 9시부터 워크숍이 시작될 예정이오니 참석자분들께서는 모두 입장하시고 자리에 착석해 주시기 바랍니다. May I have your attention, please? The IDA Korea Technology Workshop will begin shortly from 9 a.m. I'd like to ask all participants in the foyer area to please come inside and be seated.
쭉
내려가나요?
네, 쭉 하시면 될 것 같아요.
지금부터
여기까지.
다. 본 워크숍은 동시 통역이 제공됩니다. 한국어는 채널 1번, 영어는 채널 2번입니다. 아울러 행사의 원활한 진행을 위해 소지하고 계신 휴대전화의 전원을 꺼주시거나 또는 진동 모드로 변경해 주시기 부탁드리겠습니다. Simultaneous interpretation will be provided throughout the workshop. For English, please use channel 2, and for Korean, channel 1. We would also like to ask all participants to please wear your mask and please turn off your mobile phone and switch to the silent mode. 연사와 패널 참석자를 제외한 행사장에 계신 모든 분들께서는 현재 코로나 방역 수칙에 따라 전원 마스크 착용을 의무화해 주시기 부탁드리겠습니다. 아울러 자리에도 손 소독제를 비치해 두었으니 편하게 사용하시기 바랍니다. According to COVID-19 measures, I would like to ask all of you to wear a mask during the workshop. Also, please feel free to use the hand sanitizers placed on your table. 안내 말씀 드리겠습니다. 잠시 후 9시부터 워크숍이 시작될 예정이오니 참석자분들께서는 입장하시고 자리에 착석해 주시길 부탁드리겠습니다. May I have your attention, please? The IDA Korea Technology Workshop will begin shortly from 9 a.m. I'd like to ask all participants in the foyer area to please come inside and be seated. 본 워크숍은 동시 통역이 진행됩니다. 한국어는 채널 1번, 영어는 채널 2번입니다. 아울러 행사의 원활한 진행을 위해 휴대하고 계신 휴대전화의 전원을 꺼주시거나 또는 진동 모드로 변경해 주시길 부탁드리겠습니다. Simultaneous interpretation will be provided throughout the workshop. For English, please use channel 2, and for Korean, channel 1. We would also like to ask all participants to please turn off your mobile or switch to silent mode. 연사와 패널 참석자를 제외한 모든 분들께서는 현재 코로나 방역 수칙에 따라 전원 마스크 착용을 의무화해 주시기 부탁드리겠습니다. 아울러 자리에도 손 소독제와 마스크를 비치해 두었으니 편하게 사용 부탁드리겠습니다. According to COVID-19 countermeasures, I would like to ask you to wear a mask during the workshop. Also, please feel free to use the hand sanitizers placed on your table.
환영합니다.
Welcome to the
AIDA
Korea workshop on innovation
and digital technology
in the post-pandemic world,
hosted by the World Bank
and the Ministry of Economy and Finance
of Korea.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, and to all of our online participants, welcome to the AIDA Korea Workshop on Innovation and Digital Technology in the Post-Pandemic World. My name is Min-jae Kang from the World Bank Group Korea office. This workshop is designed to provide a forum to discuss the World Bank's AIDA 19 technology agenda and the potential role of the World Bank Group Korea office on digital technology, digital development leveraging technologies for international partnerships in the post-pandemic world. Now, to open the workshop, it is my greatest honor to introduce Ms. Victoria Kwakwa, World Bank Vice President for East Asia and the Pacific region. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Victoria with a big round of applause.
Min-jae, thank you so much for that warm welcome. Deputy Minister Tae-sik Yoon of the Ministry of Economy and Finance of Republic of Korea, fellow World Bank colleagues, representatives from AIDA member countries, and distinguished guests and participants, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. It is a great pleasure to speak at the opening session of the AIDA Korea Workshop on Innovation and Digital Technology in the Post-Pandemic World. Today's workshop is jointly organized by Korea's Ministry of Economy and Finance and the World Bank. I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to you, Deputy Minister Tae-sik Yoon, for hosting us today, and to colleagues at the Ministry of Economy and Finance, the World Bank Group Korea Office, the World Bank's Development Finance Vice Presidency, and the Digital Development Global Practice for all your work in organizing this event. I would also like to thank the representatives from AIDA member countries who are joining us today to share your knowledge and experience. The World Bank Group has a strong partnership with Korea, and the World Bank Group Korea Office is central to this partnership. The World Bank Group Korea Office is becoming a new global hub for innovation and technology for sustainable development, made possible by the generous support of the government of the Republic of Korea. This new global innovation and technology hub will help us support AIDA countries to harness innovation and digital technology and promote post-pandemic economic recovery. The health, social, and economic impacts of the pandemic have been severe on both developing and developed countries around the world. The pandemic is estimated to have pushed an additional 88 million to 115 million people into extreme poverty this year, and the total could rise to as many as 150 million by 2021, depending on the severity of the economic contraction. In response, the World Bank Group has already taken rapid action. We have made available up to 160 billion over a 15-month period ending June 2021 to help more than 100 countries protect the poor and vulnerable, support businesses, and bolster economic recovery. This includes a historic amount of financing for IDA 19. My colleague Akihiko Nishio will elaborate more on this later. But developing countries need more than financial resources to recover from the global impact of COVID-19 and transition to more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive growth. They will also need access to global best practices and innovative and technology-enabled development solutions. And they would benefit from global partnerships that would generate, share, disseminate, and help implement new and impactful development solutions. The World Bank Group recognizes that technological advancement is increasingly central to our development work worldwide, as technology impacts all aspects of the global economy. Partners like Korea, which has successfully leveraged digital technology for its development, can help our clients understand both the potential of digitalization and the pathways towards realizing and sharing its dividends. Digital technologies can reduce barriers to accessing markets and government services. They can improve information flows and reduce transaction costs, and thereby contribute to economic growth and job creation. But too many countries still suffer from insufficient digital connectivity, lack the regulatory and policy frameworks, and insufficient investment in human capital to help enterprises and citizens benefit from digital development. Indeed, the global digital divide widens the gap in economic opportunities between rich and poor countries, and between the rich and the poor populations within countries. COVID-19 may further widen this gap, as emerging work suggests the poor and low-skilled and those without digital access are most at risk from the economic impact of lockdowns and other public health measures to control the pandemic. Therefore, we must find a way to address the digital divide and ensure that developing countries are not left further behind in the post-pandemic world. That is why today's workshop is so important, and why the global partnership with like-minded and capable partners such as Korea is so critical. In gatherings such as today, we can find ways to promote post-pandemic recovery and help developing countries find new pathways of growth through innovations and transformative technologies. Thank you. My very best wishes for a fruitful and productive workshop. Kansamida.
Thank you, Victoria. At this time, please join me in welcoming Mr. Tae-sik Yoon, Deputy Minister of Korean Ministry of Economy and Finance, to deliver welcoming remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Yoon to the stage.
Good morning and also good evening, everyone. I'm Tae-sik Yoon, Deputy Minister for International Affairs of Ministry of Economy and Finance. And today's conference is especially meaningful for me, as this is my first official event to attend since I took this position last week. First of all, I would like to begin by expressing a sincere appreciation to Vice President Victoria Kwakwa and Vice President Akihito Nishio for hosting this IDA 19 workshop on innovation and digital technology in the post-pandemic world. I also want to thank Ambassador Lau Silvero from Paraguay, Ambassador Virgilio Paredes Trapero from Honduras, Ambassador Juan Carlos Caiza Rosero from Colombia, Ambassador Humberto Salazar from Dominican Republic, Ambassador Alejandro Rodriguez Zamora from Costa Rica, and Ambassador Dalira Yasmin Amli Sued from Rwanda for honoring us with your presence despite your busy schedule. And my special thanks goes to the Korea office and the DFI at the World Bank for organizing this meeting despite the difficulties of ongoing pandemic. The world has been going through difficult times this year with COVID-19, restricting movement of goods and people and slowing down economic activities. This has been especially true for low-income countries like IDA recipients, as the difficulties in the development project have resulted in greater economic challenges. As we address the challenges of the ongoing pandemic and prepare for the post-COVID era, digital technology will be crucial in building back better and preparing for the new economic and social structures after COVID-19. In this context, I would like to commend the World Bank on hosting today's workshop on such appropriate themes. The Korean government is convinced that innovation and digital technology will play key roles in not only preventing a future pandemic, but also expediting the recovery and driving growth in the post-pandemic world. Based on this view, the Korean government introduced the Korean New Deal in July, a national strategy to transform the country into digital and green economy based on 3 pillars: the Digital New Deal, the Green New Deal, and a stronger employment and social safety net. The Digital New Deal, in particular, is a bold policy to accelerate Korea's transition into a digital economy, drawing on our expertise in a digital innovation technology. At the same time, the Korean government plans to continue working very closely with the World Bank in promoting innovation and technology, thereby actively contributing to the economic recovery around the globe. To this end, Korea emphasized the importance of innovation and technology in addressing COVID-19 and supporting the transition into sustainable economies at the Regional Development Committee of the World Bank. In addition, to effectively support this agenda, I'm pleased to unveil the Korean government's commitment to provide $30 million over the next 3 years to the World Bank Korea office, which will become a hub for innovation and technology of the World Bank EAP region. We will also work with the Korea office to establish a new EAP technology and innovation lab, so-called T&I lab, which will support innovation in developing countries by connecting them with Korean companies with innovative technology. The Korean government acknowledges the appropriate action of the World Bank Group amid the difficult development conditions. For example, innovation and technology has been adopted as part of the special themes of the IDA-19 replenishment and have become areas of the highest priority for support in IDA countries. It seems that we are going in the right direction, designating the Korea office as a hub for innovation and technology, and agreeing on additional staffing in relevant areas such as digital development, smart city, environment, and energy. Distinguished guests, no one knows for sure when this pandemic will end. It seems like a long way before we can fully overcome the threat of the pandemic and regain economic growth. I hope the countries around the world will utilize innovation and technology in combating the health and economic challenges of COVID-19. And I hope that this conference will also provide valuable opportunities for us to explore ways for cooperation toward sustainable development of developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Minister Yoon. I would now like to welcome Mr. Akiko Nishiho, World Bank Vice President for Development Finance, to deliver welcoming remarks. Please welcome Aki as he joins us online with a big round of applause.
Thank you, Min-jae. Good morning and good evening. Thank you, Deputy Minister Yoon, for that very warm welcome. And let me congratulate you for your new appointment. Thank you all in Korea, and also those people in Washington and elsewhere, for joining this AIDA Korea workshop on innovation and digital technology in a post-pandemic world. I wish I could be there in Seoul in person to greet you, but it is wonderful to be able to connect via technology, which is the theme of this workshop. I am extremely grateful to the government of the Republic of Korea for the strong partnership in co-hosting this workshop together with the International Development Association, or AIDA, of the World Bank. Technology is a common agenda between AIDA and Korea. And my thanks extend beyond the workshop. I would like to thank the government of Korea sincerely for the overall policy and financial support it has provided to AIDA. AIDA is one of the largest and most effective platforms for fighting extreme poverty in the world's poorest countries. This year marks the 60th anniversary of AIDA. Since 1960, AIDA has been a trusted partner to the poorest countries and a pioneer in tackling some of the most complex global challenges. Over 6 decades, AIDA has invested $422 billion and supported more than 8,000 projects in 114 countries. 37 countries have graduated from AIDA, and many have progressed from low-income to middle-income countries. Some have become AIDA donors, and one of them is Korea. The story of Korea's relationship with AIDA is very unique and inspiring. From being an AIDA borrower between 1961 and 1973 to quickly transitioning to an AIDA donor in 1977. Today, Korea is a major contributor to the record $82 billion AIDA 19 replenishment, which was concluded last December, to help the poorest 74 countries during a 3-year period from July 2020 to June 2023. Korea is the 14th largest donor out of 56 countries, which is behind the G7 countries as well as China and some other large European donors. So Korea is a major donor country to AIDA. Thank you, Korea, for your support to developing countries through AIDA. So Korea has moved fast from being an AIDA borrower to a major AIDA donor over the past decades. This was concurrent with the breathtaking economic growth in Korea, which I have witnessed personally during the many visits I made to Korea. And this is why Korea is considered the model AIDA graduate, and why AIDA countries are eager to learn from Korea's experience. And Korea has been generous in sharing its development experience. In particular, Korea is taking a leading role in important global agenda, especially in the areas of harnessing technologies for development. This is why Korea is considered a bridge between the North and the South, or between developed and developing countries. Technology is also one of the key cross-cutting issues being addressed under AIDA 19. I would therefore like to take a few moments to speak on this agenda. We are confident that investments in infrastructure and the skills needed for productive digital economies will help people and markets seize greater economic opportunities. Our ambitious plans for digital development include supporting AIDA countries to double their broadband penetration and improve digital skills, especially to empower women for better access to the opportunities of the digital economy. We will also boost digital government, financial inclusion, and entrepreneurship. Our aim is to support either countries adopt technologies that are promising, inclusive, and transformative. We have seen how drone technologies in Rwanda have transformed health delivery services, making it easier to quickly get blood supplies to rural hospitals. Many other countries are lagging behind in such technologies, and digital services such as personal identification, payments, e-commerce, and digital regulation. Either countries cannot be left behind in a global world where technology is now one of the key drivers of development progress. But at the same time, we are cognizant of the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, hence the timeliness of today's workshop. While the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting everyone around the world, the poorest and most vulnerable are feeling the impacts most severely. Either countries are at risk of moving backwards on their development path, with the poverty rate rising for the first time in more than 20 years. IDA is deploying unprecedented support in its response to COVID-19. We are committing more than $55 billion in the 15-month period from April 2020 to June 2021 to enable either countries to focus on responding to the pandemic while setting the stage for a sustainable and resilient recovery. The COVID crisis has no doubt proved the importance of digital technology. This crisis demands that we deliver technology solutions with scale and speed so that all developing countries can make steady progress towards the sustainable development goals. Under these difficult pandemic times, the digital development and technology agenda has the potential to help us address key development challenges in either countries. For instance, we need solutions for school children to continue learning. We need digitally innovative ways to support health service provision. We need businesses to continue to operate. We need jobs restored and new ones created. We need to see technology open new opportunities for rural women to generate income and improve livelihoods. There is hope in the technology agenda to help either countries make progress on these issues. I am grateful to the technical experts from both developing and developed countries who will be combing through these issues and exchanging knowledge and experience that will help us all move forward post-COVID-19. At IDA and the World Bank Group, we stand ready to collaborate further with Korea to see a better world in the post-COVID-19 era, a world where digital development and innovative technology enables either countries to leapfrog and advance in turning around their economies. I wish you very fruitful discussions that will help the world's poorest countries move the needle on the technology agenda. Thank you and 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Aki. We will now move on to the keynote speech by Mr. Tae-jung Lee, Director of Development Finance Division at the Korean Ministry of Economy and Finance. Please welcome Mr. Lee to the stage.
Thank you, Vice President Kwaka, Vice President Nishio, Deputy Minister Yoon, for your kind and visionary remark. It is my pleasure to meet you all finally in person and also virtually as well. My name is Tae-jung Lee, and I'm a Director of Development Finance Division of the Korean Ministry of Economy and Finance. The Korean government has introduced the Korean New Deal in July, which is a post-COVID national strategy to support the transition to more digital, green, and sustainable country. Today, I will share the details of a Korean New Deal. My presentation will be in the following order. First on the COVID-19 status, next on the COVID-19 and the 3 policy priorities of the Korean government, and finally the Korean New Deal. Let me begin by addressing the current COVID-19 status. And this is the figure everybody are well aware. And the daily COVID-19 cases are continuing to rise globally, with the European country and the US experiencing a resurgence of confirmed cases. In response, European countries like France and UK has reimposed the partial lockdown as well. Before touching upon the Korea, and just for the participants around the world, let me just compare the Korea with the state of New York. And this is comparison. As you can see, the Korea is about 0.7 times size of the New York State, while the population size is more than 2.5 times that of the New York State. This shows that Korea is a very densely populated country, which makes it more difficult and more vulnerable for spread of COVID-19. And nevertheless, but the numbers of COVID cases per 100,000 in Korea is only the 1/50th of the New York State. In the early stage of the pandemic, Korea and the European country appear to be on the very similar path. In fact, Korea has experienced the worst COVID-19 case outside of China, and with numbers of cases surging to 909 in late February. However, the Korean government rapidly adopted the measure to tackle COVID-19. As a result, we were able to flatten the COVID-19 curve, while other countries are still struggling and find the right measure to pandemic, and also balance between the economy and quarantine. This is an article has recently released at the American Journal of Epidemiology on October 27, and this for highlighting some of the measure. Korea has been able to control the virus only by the containment and the social distancing measure, rather than imposing the large scale of restriction and lockdown. And heart of this lies with a 3T strategy, which refer to the 1, extensive testing, 2, accurate and efficient tracing, and 3, the provision of appropriate treatment. In addition, the prompt government response was crucial. The Korean government has assembled a central disaster safety countermeasure headquarters, which is headed by the Prime Minister, and also the status of the disease control measure has been elevated, and the government has provided more autonomous authority against outbreak, which means all government entities to follow the guidance of the Korean Centers for Disease Control. And furthermore, the Korean government have leveraged the innovative technology to contain the COVID-19. Next, I will go into the details of the current COVID-19 situation in Korea. Korea has recently experienced a spike of COVID-19 infection in metropolitan area like Seoul, following the first wave in the southern city of the Daegu. However, after 2 weeks of strengthening social distancing measure, the numbers of new cases has fallen to manageable level without enforcing the lockdown measure. With the country around the world experiencing a second wave, it could be said we might be sleeping with the enemy or invisible enemy quite a long time. In this regard, we should focus on the 3 tasks to deal with the ongoing and the future pandemic. The first, it is important to seek the suitable and right balance between the collection of personal information for the contact tracing and make sure the privacy of an individual has not infringed. The second, with the recent surge of cases in countries that have relaxed social distancing measures, making the right decision to when and how to reopen the economy and loosen the social distancing measure will be very crucial, and this will be very different from the country to country. Lastly, preparing for the potential second and third wave of COVID-19 is very likely, and we should all be cautious, and this will be the high priority for all countries. The next, I will explain the three policy priorities of the Korean government amid on the economic sector, and these can be represented as 3P, which are protecting, preserving, and preparing. As a result of COVID-19, the global economy is now faced with recession that the world has never seen since the Great Depression. At the same time, as the pandemic restricts the movement of people across the border, global trade has also plunged significantly. This is an article from the Wall Street Journal. The Korean economy was not immune to the economic impact of the pandemic, recording the worst performance since the Asian financial crisis in the second quarter due to the falling export. In response, the Korean government took the economic measure, which can be summarized using the 3P, namely protecting and preserving and preparing. The first is protecting the vulnerable and the small business. To help to affect the business retain their employees, we have expanded employment retention subsidy for the business that have not laid off their employees. Also, to relieve the nationwide economic damage, the government has provided the emergency relief payment to all households. For small business and SME, the government has provided the liquidity through giving the low-rate loans and extending existing loans. Second is preserving the economic resilience and vitality. The Korean government has implemented measures such as prepayment, pre-purchasing, scaling up the construction investment to boost domestic demand. For industries that are severely affected by the COVID-19, including the aviation, shipping, and automobile industry, the government has implemented a range of policy measures, such as emergency loan. To promote trade, the government has been providing the financial support and helping the business hold a non-face-to-face consultation and sign a contract with a foreign buyer. Also, we have been supporting the Korean businessmen to enter the foreign country with a special immigration arrangement with our trading partner. In total, the government has provided the fiscal stimulus and the financial measure amount of $240 billion, which is equivalent to the 14.4% of Korean GDP. And the major trade partner of Korea gradually reopened their economy, and Korea export rebounds in September for the first time in the 7 months this year. Backed by the recovery in export, our economy has finally sprung back to positive growth in the third quarter. Keeping this trend, Korean economy is projected to shrink the least among the OECD countries. Third, it is important to prepare for the post-COVID era. The ongoing pandemic is expected to bring structural changes domestically and internationally. This includes accelerate toward the digital economy, elevated need for the climate action, and call for the tighter and stronger social and employment safety net. to not only address these structural transformation, but also lead the global the economy and community in the post-COVID era, Korea government has announced the Korean New Deal in July this year. Next and finally, I will elaborate and explain the Korean New Deal in more detail. Korean New Deal is made up with two main policies. One is a Digital New Deal and two is a Green New Deal, both of which are based on the strong and robust employment and social safety net. In fact, the World Bank Group Korea office is also in line with the Korean New Deal and the direction in that it focuses on the promotion of a digital and green economy in developing countries. Now I will go into the focus area of the Korean New Deal. And first, Digital New Deal has four focus areas through which we aim to incorporate digital component into the national and economy and also the people's everyday life. The first focus area of a Digital New Deal is a stronger integration of D&A throughout the economy. This is not a biological term, and we have reinterpreted D&A as a data, network, and AI. The data ecosystem, which involves collection and utilization, disclosure, integration, and the distribution of data will be reinforced. In addition to expanding the integration of 5G and AI into industry, the government will also be innovated into the smarter government with the use of a 5G network and the AI. At the same time, the cybersecurity will be enhanced to reduce the risk of a full utilization of D&A. The second focus area of a Digital New Deal is to make the infrastructure more safer, smarter, and more convenient to use. The management system and control system of a national infrastructure system, including the national highway, railroad, harbor, and seaport, will be digitalized, and the cities and the industrial space will also be digitalized into the smart city and the smart industrial complex. And also the smart logistic distribution system will be enhanced and built for higher and more efficient delivery. The next focus area of a Digital New Deal is the digitalization of school and education infrastructure, which will be the key for not only the developed country, but the key for the many IDA countries in the future. We will be providing the full coverage of high-speed classroom Wi-Fi to all elementary, middle, and high school across the country. In addition, online education platform of university and the vocational training institution will be upgraded to provide higher quality of education and training. The last focus area of a Digital New Deal is foster the untapped industry by setting up the relevant infrastructure that are closely related to the people's daily life. The first, we'll be building 18 smart medical and care infrastructure and establishing the industry for smart medical service. And in addition, support will be provided to small and medium-sized enterprise to allow the employee to work remotely, and at the same time we'll be providing the support to online micro business to help them find the new market and opportunity. And this will conclude the Digital New Deal, and next I will move on to the Green New Deal. Green New Deal include the four focus areas which will enhance the quality of life and support the ecosystem of a green industry. The first focus area of a Green New Deal is the green transition of infrastructure. We plan to turn the public facility and houses into the zero energy building, starting with the green remodeling of old public housing. And by supporting the smart and the green transition of a 25 local regions, and by creating the more green space in urban area, we plan to restore terrestrial ecosystem. In addition, we will also make the smart water management system through the use of AI for the use of provision of clean and safe water. Next focus area is expansion of low carbon and the decentralized energy supply. We will expand the supply of the renewable energy while also the building of an advanced system of smart meter for efficient management of energy. In addition, we will implement the green mobility project by supplying more than 1 million electronic vehicles and more than 200,000 hydrogen vehicles, as well as supporting to scrappage of 1.2 million old diesel vehicles out of the street of Korea. The third focus area of a Green New Deal is building the ecosystem for the green industry. We will building the 6th green integrated cluster in leading areas such as the biomaterial industry, as well as the 10 smart green industrial complex. At the same time, smart ecological plan and clean factory that reduce the population will also be established. In support of such innovation in the green industry, and the government will spend high amount of the budget supporting the research and development of green technology and the provision of venture capital to support this industry. Lastly, I would like to brief on the policy to strengthen the social safety net, which is overarching the first two components. And just like the Vice President Kwaka has mentioned, COVID-19 does not discriminate whether you are rich or poor, but the impact on scars of COVID-19 are harshly hit on the vulnerable class and also the less developed region and country. The first, in terms of a stronger social employment safety net, we recognize the greater shock on the vulnerable group during the times of crisis. The government plans to expand the employment insurance system in phase to introduce the employment support program to allow the low-income group to focus on their job search without worrying about their livelihood. In addition, eligibility criteria for the basic livelihood security benefit, which is the Korea's minimum standard support system, will be relaxed in phase by year 2022. To push ahead with the Korean New Deal plan, the government has been taking the 4 phases. The first is maximizing the pump priming effect of government financing. Second is pushing for the institutional reform to facilitate the private sector. And third is providing the sustainable and sufficient funding for the Korean New Deal through the Korean New Deal the fund. The last but not the least, the Korean government is seeking to spread the Korean New Deal across the country and promoting the balanced national strategy. This will conclude my presentation, and we do not, just like the Deputy Minister Yoon has mentioned, we do not know when the pandemic will be over. We are able to move on with the next time. But I really think that this is a really good opportunity and for not only Korean economy, but also the IDA country to catch up. Because as we look back to the 20 years during the 1997 Asian financial crisis, although the crisis has been harshly affect our economy, but our government has utilized as a potential and opportunity to heavily invest on the high-speed broadband internet, and this will be the backbone of the IT industry in the current status. And I really think that after the COVID-19 is over, we hope that this will be also the really important game changer for the IDA country to transform their economy, the more greener and more digitalizing to facing the new challenges. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. We have over 200 online participants joining us today, and we're getting real-time feedback on your presentation that it is an inspiring and informative presentation on Korea's response to COVID-19 and the economic impact, as well as the Korean New Deal. It's inspiring to learn that the Korean New Deal is an overarching policy support that strengthens employment and social safety net, and certainly one that can serve as a great model in international development. Let us now move on to session 1, the promise and challenges of the digital economy for IDA countries. The session will be moderated by Ms. Buteina Guermazzi, Director of Digital Development Global Practice of the World Bank. Buteina, over to you.
Distinguished guests, Your Excellencies, it's a real pleasure for me to be among you today, even though virtually, and I'm very excited to moderate this first session on the IDA Korea workshop on innovation and digital technology in a post-pandemic world. Digital technologies, as we all know, played a key role during the pandemic in support of sectors including health, education, government services, social protection, and digital development will certainly be an important part, will play an important part in the recovery phase and towards building sustainable resilience. The pandemic clearly gave a renewed attention to digital transformation, and we saw countries, we saw citizens, we saw firms embrace digital technologies as they cope with the pandemic and to ensure business continuity. The pandemic also showed us the scale and the deep dimension of the digital divide between and within countries. For many years now, we've been pushing for digital transformation, for digital inclusion. What happened with COVID is that the agenda got to the next level of the urgency to support governments all around the world to take advantage of the transformational potential of digital technologies. What is at stake is the opportunity of tomorrow for our youth. It is a prospect for a better, more inclusive public service, and it is our ability to innovate in all sectors of development. As we heard today, digital is an important element in IDA 19, as we see a number of commitments around broadband connectivity, also around digital gender inclusion, around the JET agenda, around financial inclusion, around boosting government and digital government. So all these areas, I'm sure, we'll tap into during our conversation in this panel. Today, we look at the promises and challenges of digital agenda in IDA countries with high-level representatives connected from different parts of the world who will share with us their vision about the opportunities, about the challenges, and we'll also hear from the experience of Korea in this sector. So join me, please, in welcoming the panel for today's discussion. We have Mr. Vincent Bagir from Uganda. He is the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance of the Government of Uganda. We have with us today also Mr. Timothy Antoine. He is the Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Many thanks, Governor, for connecting a bit late on your side. Much appreciated. We have with us today Dr. Songwon Ko, who will be presenting on site from Korea. He's a director and senior fellow of the Department of Development Cooperation Research at KISTI, the Korean Information Society Development Institute. We have with us today also Mr. Anish Chaudhary from Bangladesh. He is a policy advisor of A2I, a digital innovation implementation agency at the ICT division. We have with us Dr. Nguli Teng from Cambodia. He's the executive director of a startup center. And we have with us Ms. Jae Kin Kim from Korea Telecom. She is the executive director of the Economics and Management Research Institute of KT. I would like to start this conversation through a regional lens and move directly to Africa. So Africa is clearly a region that embraced digital transformation with a regional strategy endorsed by the African Union and several digital transformation programs across the continent. Let us hear first from young entrepreneurs through a short video to get a sense of the expectations and perspective of those who will bring innovation, the youth. We will then connect with Mr. Vincent Baguier for a fireside conversation we recorded a bit earlier.
I'm doing this because I feel personally really passionate about being part of the solution.
In logistics, in power, in mobility, in banking.
Basic needs industries like food,
e-learning, fintech, animation and gaming.
Infrastructure, transport, payments, commerce.
What startups do, they disrupt a certain industry that's already been there.
And it being so early still and relatively small means that there are obviously lots of opportunities for new types of businesses.
Africa skipped the landlines, right? So they went to mobile right away. We have to do the exact same thing in power, in logistics, distribution, in transportation and mobility, in access to internet and access to power.
This is a very, very exciting time, especially as mobile phone networks continue to roll out 4G technology. Essentially just opens up a very, very significant opportunity across the continent.
We're in a phase where a lot of the infrastructure is being built. I think the key though is to try not just to copy and paste what has worked in other regions.
The model that Africa should continue is an innovation that can be exported to other emerging markets, because that is why our companies become profitable.
Talent infrastructure, that's really what I want to dedicate my life for, maybe another 5 to 10 years to see where KOR.VER goes.
IFC and Google and other people that are really invested in trying to see how to lift Africa from poverty through entrepreneurship and innovation, and telling our story to Africa and to the rest of the world.
It's a really, really great time to be in the continent.
There are obviously lots of opportunities for new types of businesses.
Africa, sustainable
entrepreneurship,
Africa,
innovation,
transformative change.
Africa.
So if you headed a venture fund, right, where would you put your money? Right now, it's in Africa, yeah.
I'd like to welcome you, Mr. Permanent Secretary Vincent Baguier of the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance of the Government of Uganda. Thank you very much for joining us in this discussion about challenges and opportunities that either countries face and how they use digital transformation. This is within the context of IDA Korea workshop. Very warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here with you, and I look forward to the engagement.
Very good. So the first one, I'd like to hear a 1-minute reaction from you on the video we just saw. We know how Africa is really full of great youth potential, lot of good ideas, and the video showed a very high voice about their aspiration and how they see digital transformation. What is your take?
Well, I think the video is extremely informative. Indeed, it does speak to what Africa is. Africa has a very young population across all the nations. This population is thirsty, is hungry for information, and therefore using connectivity to search for information. But beyond that, there are opportunities that come with digitization, opportunities in employment, opportunities in improving skills. So it's quite insightful and informative. And indeed, the video speaks to two fundamental issues, namely the need to increase our infrastructure and enhance the infrastructure, and also the services that run in that infrastructure. So it's instructive in a manner that It combines the two, infrastructure and services, and therefore providing opportunities for the young Africans.
Very good. I also saw it as a call to action to really cater for the youth and their voice during the crisis, but also beyond, and how digital can be key to their vision of the world. So thank you so much for your reactions. So we know Uganda is, embarking and doing a lot on digital, and we're very, very excited to have you with us today to share your experience. How did you see digital tools and opportunities in the context of COVID? What did Uganda do to take advantage of digital tools in a world that became virtual overnight?
Like all countries throughout the world, Uganda too went through a lockdown. And during the lockdown, it meant that citizens, the public, would only rely on digital measures to make ends meet. And indeed, thanks to the private sector and to a large extent, the efforts by government, citizens were in position to get services on using the digital platforms, doing their shopping online, with the exception of things like medication where you needed to physically visit a doctor. But much of the services were, especially in the urban centers, were accessed online. And in so doing, we were able to indeed comply with the measures and also follow what the scientists had guided to the extent that stay as much as possible at home, so that would give them an opportunity to study the virus and its mutation with a view of preparing, because the country was never going to be locked down permanently. So the scientists wanted to study how the virus moves, and also prepare the hospitals as well as the all health facilities for the outcome. Now, in that challenge that we all faced, you found that the usage of digital platforms increased. The small companies that were doing e-commerce on a very small scale were required to actually up their scale, in that people who could afford or who even have the connectivity and infrastructure were ordering for groceries online, ordering for all manners of things online. And of course, certainly that came with a number of challenges. On part of the private sector, their networks were overwhelmed. But most fundamentally, the use of fintech, financial services, sitting in the comfort of your home and drawing money from your bank account and putting it on your mobile phone, what we refer to as mobile money, increased tremendously. In fact, there were individuals who did not know you could transfer your money from a bank account to mobile money and pay for services. Indeed, there were those who had not even used their bank accounts to do online banking. So all that was ignited during the lockdown for those who have accounts. And indeed, it made a case for the digitization of most of the services within government and the private sector.
Excellent. Thank you so much, PS. I like your word of how this crisis ignited digital transformation at all levels, as you mentioned. I mean, at the individual level, at the government level, the private sector. Thank you so much for sharing the experience of Uganda. So now, as we start thinking about moving from emergency reaction to hopefully getting to a point where we think about resilience recovery and building back better. What is the approach that Uganda is taking in terms of the strategy for digital transformation in general?
First of all, we are extremely grateful to the World Bank Group. They've supported us in a number of ways in the entire economy, but specifically in the digital transformation agenda. The World Bank has walked the talk with us. We have a facility, the Regional Communication Infrastructure Project, and indeed, this facility came in extremely handy during the lockdown and during where movements were restricted. Using the facility, government of Uganda was in position to procure bulk internet bandwidth. And what that meant was the cost of internet connectivity, because we bought in bulk, came down drastically, not just for government, but even for the private sector. Now, by so doing, it made it possible for people to utilize online platforms because the cost had become fairly competitive and affordable. Beyond that, we've upgraded our data center. We have a government cloud, largely because government is churning out lots and lots of data. We have automated our national ID. And as you know, the national ID is a requirement in most countries to be able to access a number of services. So in that context, we are now looking at the integration of our services post-COVID to see to it that all services are integrated and they speak to each other, both within government and the private sector. And all these efforts are being done with the support of the World Bank Group. In addition to that, we are expanding the government network, the fiber optic network, which is extremely crucial because there are areas in the country where the private sector, the telecom operators, have said they will not invest largely because it's not economically viable. But it's the duty and responsibility of government to ensure that nobody is left behind as the SDGs prescribe. So in that sense, we have extended infrastructure to these areas, the fiber, to ensure that there is connectivity. In saying all this, of course, we have some major challenges. The challenges relate to the low level of skills, digital skills to be very specific. And that means as government, we have to develop a strong digital skills agenda to ensure that the masses indeed can also get services from government and the private sector using the digital platforms. To achieve this, we are thinking about localizing some of the services such that they're in the local dialects where somebody can indeed log onto a platform in their local language and be able to receive services from government.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I know this was very short, but within the short discussion, I think you brushed a very nice picture of a holistic approach that the government is taking, focusing on inclusive digital connectivity. You touched upon the importance of data and the cloud, the importance of affordable access. And of course, it's all about people, it's all about humans. So the human dimension of making sure that people have the skills to take advantage of the transformation is very important. Thank you so much for your time, for your participation today. And thank you for the opportunity for the bank to be working with you on this agenda.
Thank you very much.
Back to the live show now. I suggest we continue with the regional lens. And since it's getting late in the Caribbean, I'd like to ask the next question to Governor Antoine of the ECCB. So Governor, we had the privilege to work closely with you on the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project, which is the first regional digital economy project. It was approved last June. I'd like to invite you to share with us your views about a regional approach for digital transformation. Why is it critical for successful digital transformation? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? Over to you, Governor.
Well, thank you, Bettina. And let me say, let me begin by thanking you and the World Bank for this invitation and commending you for your leadership and support of the Caribbean Digital Transformation Program. When we met 18 months ago to begin to vision and to prepare this project, we had no idea we would be facing a pandemic now. But the good thing is that that project enables our region to have a very powerful response in respect of digital transformation. So I want to thank you for your work on that. I'd also wish to thank Korea for its contribution to IDA 19 and for hosting this particular workshop. The IDA countries which I represent are small island developing states, very vulnerable to economic shocks, external shocks, including natural disasters.
And so it's something I say all the time. We cannot change our history, we cannot change our geography, but we can certainly elevate our development trajectory via digitization. When we considered the pillars of a digital economy, we immediately recognized that our region was lagging in several material aspects. And I remember you were part of those discussions and sharing with us international best practices and experiences around the world. And so we swiftly concluded that the best path to build out a digital economy was to adopt a regional approach. And of course, we were fortified or are fortified in this view by the example of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, a monetary union of 8 small countries that have served our region extremely well for the past 37 years. So let me now highlight 2 key challenges. The first is expanding connectivity. Our basic vision for our region and for the IDA countries that we represent is that every individual, business, and government has access to high-speed, low-cost, and reliable broadband. At this moment, about 40% of our citizens lack access to broadband connectivity. Furthermore, affordability remains a significant challenge, even for those connected, as the cost of broadband internet is among the highest in the Western Hemisphere. So of necessity and urgency, especially in this period, we need to close the digital gap. Second challenge, big challenge, and there's several, but I mentioned 2, financial exclusion. Many of our citizens are unbanked, underbanked, and lack access to credit. Additionally, payments are too slow and too expensive. And so as a consequence, the provision of affordable and accessible digital financial services is critical. And I will tell you that is a key motivation for our central bank, which will soon launch a retail central bank digital currency, a payment instrument to address this issue of financial inclusion. And we regard the digitization of the EC dollar as a critical step in the digitization of our economy and society, with significant benefits for financial inclusion, innovation, and competitiveness. And now let me briefly talk about a couple of opportunities, and I would mention 2. First is digital platforms. For us, building public platforms with critical components such as digital ID and cybersecurity to facilitate public services is critical. And of course, e-commerce. And one of the very important benefits of doing this, Dr. Buthina, is building digital trust among our citizens. That's one of the reasons as well why we're doing this CBDC. The second opportunity I'd like to mention is digital skills and entrepreneurship. We need to help our citizens become not just digitally literate, but give them an opportunity to fully participate in the digital economy, not just as consumers, but as producers. We want digital trade, and so we have to enable our people so to do. And I want to emphasize here the criticality of entrepreneurship as an antidote to the high levels of unemployment in some of our countries. 20 years ago in the Caribbean, the biggest or major cause of poverty was lack of education. Today, the biggest cause of poverty is unemployment. Unemployment, especially amongst our youth, which doubles the national average. And so we believe that we have an opportunity with this project funded by IDA to really enable our countries to build out the digital economy and to have a chance for shared prosperity. And I'll end it there.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us the approach, and the vision, and the challenges and the opportunities looking at a regional approach for digital transformation in the Eastern Caribbean. And very good approach of looking at the whole ecosystem and tackling not just connectivity, but prices, financial inclusion, and of course, at the end of the day, a true digital transformation is one that enables people to be not only consumer of technology, but also producers. So very good. Thank you so much for sharing. I'd like now to turn to Korea to bring in some perspectives from our host country today. Dr. Sung-Woon Ko, we know that policies and regulations are key for a successful digital transformation. In the post-COVID era, could you share with us what are the building blocks of how countries should be thinking about digital transformation and using Korea as an example? Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you, Butaina. First, it's my great honor to participate in this important event, and I prepared the PPT deck for that question. Next, please. Okay, I think I should. Okay, I identified 5 success factors of digital economy policy in Korea: technological capacity building and innovation, responsive and evolutionary policy making, good governance and stable funding, ecosystem approach for national digital strategy, and emphasis on digital skills. I want to start by quoting the diagram from World Bank publication back in 2010, the determinants of technological upgrading in developing countries. Korea's rise in ICT space was a typical technological absorptive capacity building process from imitation to innovation. As of 2017, Korea's ICT R&D intensity, which is lighter blue bar in the diagram, is almost 2% of GDP, only behind Israel. The ICT R&D intensity is the second highest in Korea, not because of investment from the government, but because of investment from large firms like Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics. As you can see in the picture, from 2014 to 2016, Samsung Electronics was the #1 patenting company, and LG Electronics was the #1 trademarking company. These firms found and seized the opportunities in the global value chain. As you can see in the diagram, trade openness and forward participation index are relatively higher in Korea. The evolutionary path of Korea's digital economy policy making has reflected technological change and market conditions. Korea successfully leveraged existing assets and past experiences in formulating new policies and promoting new products. This diagram shows an excellent example of a responsive digital economy policy making and quick implementation. Korean government stepped up contact tracing using the COVID-19 analysis support system this March, which was initially a smart city technology system using big data analysis. This system allows various data such as surveillance camera footage, mobile locational data, and credit card transactions of confirmed COVID-19 patients to be immediately analyzed and provided to health investigators. The analysis that took a day ends within 10 minutes with this system. There are 2 mechanisms for policy coordination: political leverage and incentive or budgetary allocation. In a presidential regime, the top-down approach can jumpstart digitalization, as in the case of Korea. Korea set aside a budget for ICT R&D, HRD, and network deployment in the form of an informatization promotion fund back in the early 90s, high political leverage and stable funding have been two pillars for the consistent digital economy policy making in Korea. This slide shows the change of ministries in charge of digital economy policy making in Korea. I skipped the detailed explanation. Korea took an ecosystem approach for policy making. It was service network product for IT 839 strategy of 2004 and CP&D content platform network and device for new IT policy of 2008. And now DNA, data network and AI for iKorea 4.0 and digital New Deal. Data is sometimes called future oil and other times sunlight. Oil is an excludable private good, and the sunlight is a non-excludable public good. The Korean government has built various data sets for public release, as you can see in the slide. Korea recently amended the law to expedite the transaction of data. Korea believed the mantra that if you build it, they will come. That is, if you once have the network, contents, and application will follow. The percentage of fiber in total fixed broadband connection is highest in Korea. Lastly, I'd like to emphasize the policy for digital skills development in Korea. You like to have the balanced promotion of basic, applied, and professional digital skills for digitalization like Korea. Thank you. This is the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much. You know, I have to tell you that the first time I heard DNA, it was about 2 years ago. I was in Korea, and I fell in love with that concept to the point that, you know, even when we think about how we define digital infrastructure, I told the minister at the time that, you know, the bank is going to borrow how you define digital connectivity. And I think, you know, DNA between data, artificial intelligence, and the network of the future, that's an incredible foundation to build on the digital economy. So thank you so much for sharing and for highlighting the importance of the skills agenda and how policy is really a key element on how all these things come together for a digital transformation. Thank you so much. Let's now connect with South Asia to hear from Mr. Anir Chaudhary from Bangladesh. We want to hear your experience in the context of COVID-19. Can you share with us how Bangladesh implemented digital responses to the pandemic to support citizens, to support businesses, to support public services? Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me properly?
Very good.
Great, wonderful. Good morning to everybody. Good afternoon and good evening to wherever you are from around the world where you're watching. It was very heartening to hear the previous presenters about how digital transformation has really been the lifeline for response. The same thing happened in Bangladesh as well. Many of you know that since 2009, when the Honorable Prime Minister called the political agenda of digital Bangladesh, that's where the digital transformation journey really began. And that has put us in good stead in terms of preparation. So we used a combination of online, internet, and also non-internet technologies. So I'll talk about some of that. First, the health response. We realized that a lot of our population actually did not have access to the internet. So what we did was we used regular phones. So we repurposed a helpline system that we had called 333, which was used to serve citizens with information and services across the board, a whole of government approach. We repurposed it for health to make it a reporting system for symptoms. When the COVID pandemic hit us in March, we had only one test center, one RT-PCR center, maybe doing about 300 to 400 tests a day. but we needed to know where the disease was spreading the fastest. So this 333 reporting system, which has so far had about 20 million or so calls coming in, allowed us to see where the disease was spreading. So essentially, we set up with the 4 telcos using anonymized data and a secure server, and that allowed us to track disease 7 to 10 days in advance, so that we knew where to send the health response in terms of doctors, ventilators, ICU units, isolation centers, and so on and so forth. The same system allowed us to overnight create with about 4,000 doctors, the largest telemedicine system in the country. And this happened almost organically. I mean, we had a call to action for doctors, and 4,000 doctors joined in about 2 weeks to provide support free of charge to millions of callers over the next couple of months. The same system was used during a double whammy that we had, where we had a cyclone hitting us. And we had people calling in for emergency relief. About 17 million people called during that cyclone emergency, which was at the same time with the pandemic. And about 400,000 citizens were actually helped with emergency relief using that system. We used the same system to support about 5 million who we're calling new KOR, people who were actually in the informal economy, who lost jobs because a lot of sectors actually shut down, partially or completely, during the lockdown between May and June. So about 5 million people were actually helped using different mechanisms. So we were able to identify them using phone data and mobility data, where they were actually moving from cities to villages at the same time. On the education side, since schools were closed, schools, colleges, and universities were closed since late March, and they're still closed, in fact, we moved a lot of our educational content online, but more importantly, on TV. We had a TV station called the Parliament TV, which was used for mainly parliamentary broadcasts. So we used that same TV station because it was not being used for Parliament at that time. Obviously, Parliament sessions were not being held. So we took our primary education, secondary education, madrasa, religious education, and vocational education to put thousands of content online and reached a sizable number, over 50% of our population, school-going population during that time. So that was also something that we did fairly quickly. Another thing I'd like to talk about, we heard a lot about skills development. What we did during this time is to identify which sectors would require new skill development, specifically digital skill development in the next 1.5 years. So we saw that we may actually lose jobs in about 11 sectors in the next 1.5 years, but about 5 sectors are showing tremendous potential for growth. About 4 million new jobs will be created, but we do need to create new skills to take advantage of these 4 million opportunities. So we put a lot of emphasis in making sure that we don't let this opportunity pass us by. The last thing I'd like to say, the pandemic, in a sense, I mean, the previous speakers have also said, has been what we call the digital dividend, or the pandemic dividend, or COVID dividend, as we now call it. For instance, judiciary, we saw a lot of our cases were backed up. We already have overcrowding in prisons. And during the pandemic, the court hearing was not taking place. So we saw that a lot of bail petitions actually were piling up, and the prisons were becoming even more overcrowded. People who could actually move out of jail on bail were actually staying in jail. So we introduced a virtual court system. And then again, this was using repurposed technologies that we've been trying to use in courts for a number of years, but COVID actually made it happen. The natural forces did not. It was actually required a COVID for the courts to move into action to becoming virtual courts. So we saw about 47,000 court hearings taking place in the months between June and July. and about 20,000 people actually moved out of jail on bail. So these are some of the success stories that have happened as far as digital transformation was concerned during COVID. There are many more. Just wanted to point out a few across education, across judiciary, across public service delivery, across social safety nets, and most importantly, for healthcare delivery. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing these examples. And you mentioned the COVID dividend. I think it's a very interesting concept. When people talk about the silver lining, if there is a silver lining for this pandemic, I think it's around digital, because it really showed that any resistance to digital transformation was no longer possible. I mean, the only way for governments and citizens and firms to cope with the new normal was to use connectivity and use digital to do that. And you gave us ample examples of the experience of Bangladesh, from health to education, and also a good flexibility in the approach, because if we needed to look at different types of technologies, I mean, TV was a great example to use to make sure that there is continuity on the education side. So thank you so much for sharing. We heard today from the different panelists about the importance of the entrepreneurship angle and the importance of making sure that there is a good system to help entrepreneurs, to help the startup ecosystem. And we're delighted to have with us today Dr. Nguli Tang, who I'm gonna invite you to talk to us about the startup ecosystem in Cambodia, your experience. How did you see young entrepreneurs coping with the situation, and what's Cambodia doing to make sure that digital entrepreneurship is on top of the agenda? Over to you, Doctor.
Okay, thank you very much, Botanas, and good morning, good afternoon, and good everyone to everyone, depending on where you are in the online meeting. In line with the global and regional trend on building a strong digital economy, the government, educational institutions, private sectors, and other relevant agencies must work together to create a conducive environment for nurturing and supporting startups to have a high growth opportunity, as well as becoming a business enterprise. The startup ecosystem in Cambodia is quite young, started in 2011 from a small meetup with a group of passionate people interested in sharing ideas. It was not very much developed until recently, when the government started engaging in terms of policies and committing the resources aiming at creating a vibrant and healthy startup ecosystem. The creation of the Startup Center, where I am from, is one among those government initiatives. So far, Cambodia has produced more than 300 startups, while 2/3 are inactive, 100 are striving for growth and scaling up, and only a few who can go regionally, for example, to Myanmar, to Laos, and Vietnam. Among those nurture startups, they are working to solve on a wide range of problems, mainly on platform economy, such as ride-hailing services, last mile delivery, food delivery, e-commerce, fintech, smart agriculture, to name a few. And those are really important, especially during the COVID pandemic, because most people do not connect to each other physically, but they can use the apps in order to order the food or the other services from the online. In a recent year, we see a number of startups from the regions were introduced to Cambodian market as well. For example, like Grab from Singapore, Panda from Singapore as well. The presence of those regional startups brings both threats and opportunity. It is a threat as it can kill the local startup due to having a huge amount of supporting finance to operate the business. And it can be an opportunity as well, in a way that to let the local startup to further innovate to keep pace with the regional ones. The competition at the moment is quite fierce, as we can see an example between the PassUp versus Grab, Yum24 versus Panda, and yet the government has no plan to intervention the local startup and let the innovation drive to the business grow, but we are monitoring closely. Although the startup ecosystem in Cambodia is flourishing, it is far from being complete. There are four main identified challenges. First, The stakeholders in the ecosystem are still fragmented. Second, we have insufficient high skill of talent. Third, the quality of the incubators and accelerators are still questionable, need to be improved. Lastly, the investor keen to invest only a truly innovative solution rather than an imitation one, yet suitable for Cambodian markets. In order to overcome these startup challenges, the government take a leading role through an immediate response and embed to the policy measure to the supported startup ecosystem in the draft digital economy policy. Speaking of which digital economy policy, Cambodian government has started preparing the draft of the digital economy policy in early 2019 and expected to finish by end of this year, 2020. The policy has gone through a few consultations already with the World Bank last year when we was in Washington. Thanks a lot for the contribution to the draft policy, and with the other development partner as well. As of now, the policy is in first draft and being commented among the intermediary within the government. During the development of the digital economy policy, we did not anticipate the major crisis like the one we are facing with the COVID-19. We created the policy because we want to find a new economic growth driver to improve our economy resiliency, because we have only four main pillars to contribute to the GDP currently. They are the garment industry, tourism, agriculture, and constructions. The COVID-19 pandemic affects to a great extent on tourism and partly on the garment industry due to the disruptions of the regional and global supply chains. Although the COVID pandemic doesn't affect much on Cambodian life, it has severe impacts on economics. For those who are working in the affected sectors are reskilled and are covered the allowance partly from the company and partly from the government. We do support not only to startup during the crisis, but to all sides of formal business and to the poor citizen as well. As of now, the government has rolled out 6 cycles of interventions to support them. The main highlighted interventions are: one, the tax holiday for service and tourism industry from February till December 2020. Second, subsidy for the salary to company in garments, footwear, and tourism industry that severely affected by the COVID-19. Third, we inject enough cash flows in terms of incentivizing the loan to support the business, SME, and startup through the creations of the SME banks and credit guarantee scheme. Fourth, provide the cash directly to the poor. I mean, we are one among the few low-income countries that able to provide the cash directly to the poor. I mean, that is our uniqueness. This scheme is applied not only SME or company, but also the startup. As of yesterday, Cambodia is fortunate enough. We don't have a major outbreaks that locked down the country. That is why there is a discussion among the top leaders to develop a strategy for post-COVID economic recovery. I mean, as presented by the Korean deputy minister, the Korea has a 3P approach, but we have a 3R approach, namely recovery, reforms, and resiliency. Recovery, we are focusing on safety, mitigation the impact, and sustain and reward the business. And reform, we focus on diversifications and competitiveness. For resiliency, we cover the social protections, inclusiveness, and sustainability itself. So these are the mechanisms that we are hopefully to bring back our economy into its growth path. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thanks for the great examples of specific support for the startups during the COVID period. Very good examples that I'm sure many participants will find interesting, as you know, many countries are thinking about a similar approach. And then what you mentioned at the end, I think this is something that both Aki and Victoria started with in their opening remarks, is that the pandemic even hit everybody, but I think it hit harder, you know, the the parts of the society that work in the informal sector, the poorest of the poor. So having examples that you all shared today about targeted support through social protection is very good contribution. So thank you so much for that. We go now to our last speaker for the panel today, and we'd like to hear the voice of the industry. So thanks to Ms. Jae King Kim. So Ms. Kim, could you share with us Korea Telecom experience during the crisis? And from your industry perspective, can you provide us with the prospects of digital transformation, the way KT has been thinking about it? Over to you, Ms.
Thank you. Today, I would like to share the experience of KT and Korea on the changes and the role of digital after COVID pandemic. As you know, COVID pandemic has turned the world into a digital testing ground, and Korea was no exception. So, COVID economic recovery will be a process of adaptation and reinvention of digital transformation. During the pandemic, many people have realized that they could actually do more things online and felt it could be much more convenient and effective than they thought. For companies, technology is understood as the key differentiator between all companies irrespective of industries. In Korea, we could find some features of this digital new normal. The biggest change might be the way we think of space. Especially, home has undergone the most dramatic change. During lockdown, our home became an office, a school, a hospital, a gym, and even a virtual concert hall. Spaces are now redefined as location independent and me-centric place where I am through online access and digital solutions. Among many things, I think working from home gave us an opportunity to think about the nature of workplace and the role of digital. Due to the lockdown and the social distancing, KT also had to implement the remote work. Interestingly, it turned out that a set of remote work system had already been embedded inside in KT way before COVID outbreak began. The only thing we had to was to connect office and home workers securely and fully utilize the solutions like video conferencing software so that they could easily collaborate in a cloud environment. Throughout this process, we actually found these remote solutions much more convenient and productive enough at the same time. Why is this so important? Indeed, everyone has suffered from COVID, but working moms who had to make their right balance between working and parenting probably have suffered the most. Like the report from Financial Times, there was a concern that how this COVID might be at risk of taking women back to the 1950s. But in fact, the remote work solution could save both companies and such female talents from this risk. KT has introduced a flexible remote work system to follow social distancing. As a result, up to 30% of total employees worked from home, and most beneficiaries of this scheme were the young employees who had to take care of their children in the daytime due to the closed daycare centers and schools. In that sense, digital solutions have proven to be excellent tools to enhance gender equality and address social challenges such as securing continuity of education, healthcare operations, and so forth. The next big feature was the proliferation of online experience throughout all generations. Korea has a smartphone penetration rate of 93%. With mobile, we were able to respond more easily with less social confusion. Emergency Disaster Relief Fund app, COVID-19 track tracing map, and medical mask stock map are good examples. They have become the driving force behind the faster and more effective reach of beneficiaries to the socially underprivileged. Now, with QR code and digital thermal mask camera authentication, people can stay safe offline. As such, the importance of digital accessibility and digital literacy goes beyond convenience and has a direct link with the survivor. Next is the faster digital transformation and the possibility of unmanned economy. In Korea, robots and AI have already been widely adopted. Robots are used for quarantines, serving, and delivery, and AI also embedded in various devices and locations to support real-time decision-making around us. In fact, KT has introduced hotel concierge robots and AI contact centers a few years ago. Recently, we have seen a shift in perception where people are now starting to think robots are safer and get used to talking to AI chatbots. In our interviews, restaurant owners who had adopted serving robots said one robot performed at least 1.5 people's work and wanted to increase the number of serving robots in the future. These trends are inevitably changing the future of work. Some jobs will be replaced and new jobs will be created. How to prepare for these changes will be critical issues for all of us. In responding to these crises, I cannot but mention the importance of digital infrastructure. Compared to the end last year, cellular traffic in Korea has increased from 8.8 gigabytes per person to 10.5 gigabytes by August 2020. Despite the surge in online classes and online media consumption, there was no significant network problems reported or downgrade of video quality. As Korea's #1 telecommunication company, KT has provided nationwide top-notch digital infrastructures and solutions such as 5G, AI, and cloud. And now, KT is collaborating with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on the project, which develops AI big data algorithm to prevent the spread of infectious disease using mobile data and IoT sensors. As for the Korean New Deal, I just want to emphasize the importance of securing new talent for new jobs. In order to foster AI talent and create an AI ecosystem, KT formed AI1 team with universities, industrial companies, and research institutes. KT is providing opportunities of reskilling of AI to our employees and a cloud-based platform for AI education to our partners. Lastly, I would like to conclude by making some suggestions. As a society becomes disconnected, the importance of connectivity will increase even more. Korea's implication for IDA members demonstrate how important digital preparedness is. If traditional New Deal were about investing in social infrastructure, modern New Deal should focus more on securing the internet and digital infrastructure as a strategic asset. Next, we need a new approach for new digital era. Korea deregulated the use of personal information for public interest to prevent the spread of MERS years ago, and that enabled us speedy response to COVID crisis. Also, during this pandemic, although temporary, remote medical treatment is allowed. We should come up with new rules from a long-term perspective, not a temporary permit. Last but not least, digital could be the key for social inclusion. Just as reading and writing not only for scholars, digital skills are not just for developers. We have to think more deeply on how to effectively strengthen ICT education to more people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is very good elements that you shared with us today, and a key point is very clear. I mean, countries that were prepared digitally found it easier to cope with the pandemic. So the importance of digital inclusion is key. The importance of thinking about the skills. So very good elements that you shared with us today, and also the whole discussion around let's not think about connectivity in a static manner. I think you provide very good examples about what's next, the frontier, you know, AI and 5G, and how do we make sure that kids at school are ready when they get out of school to this new world of jobs that has a lot of AI in it. Very good examples there. So thank you so much for sharing. So we have 7 minutes to the end of the session. And I wanna, we received a couple of questions from the audience. So one was, linked to this last comment about the importance to think about frontier technologies. And the question coming from the audience is, should developing countries consider frontier technologies or focus only on basic connectivity issues? So that's a question. I think we got the answer from the last presentation. But let me go to our panelists. Maybe Governor, can I ask you to reflect on this question? What is the limitation of how we think about the next frontier for technologies? How do we prepare our workforce to be ready for the jobs of the future?
Well, I think we have to embrace frontier technology. I gave the example earlier of the central bank digital currency, which our central bank is about to launch. And for us, it is simply using blockchain technology to make a quantum leap in the area of payments and also in respect of cybersecurity. If we were to take the route to try to get to where the advanced payment systems are in the advanced economies, it would take us 30 years. We don't have that luxury of time. So we have an opportunity to really make a bold move. And so I think we have to do that. That's a simple example, but a real life example. And there are others. Certainly you look at education, and I think there are real possibilities now for us to really improve learning outcomes using technology, using a blended approach. And we have to be bold and imaginative in this period. I think that the reality is that, as you said earlier, the pandemic, a gift of the pandemic, as bad as it is that it has forced us to quickly pivot. We must seize that opportunity. And I believe if we have a growth mindset, we can basically make the leap. And that's what I'm encouraging our countries to do. That's what our central bank is trying to do.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you so much. Let me go to our guests for 1 minute reflections on what you heard or anything you wanna close your participation with. So let's go to Dr. Tang from Cambodia.
Okay. I cannot follow up your last question. I mean, whether I would reflect to the whole workshop or I should answer to the questions.
No, now it's just 1 minute for each one of you to just give us your last thoughts about the topic. Yes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for the sake of Cambodia, I mean, COVID-19 gave us a big lesson that we need something to build on our own to be very strong in order to support our people. I mean, we have a motto, for example, like we have to consider about life, about livelihood, and about the business. But the life meaning that we need to at least provide the basic food. For example, we need to strengthen our agriculture. We need to strengthen about healthcare system. And for the livelihood, of course, we need to have a more basic need and to ensure that the job is enough for them. And for the business, it's the same thing that we need to at least provide a favorable environment to support the business in terms of the raising competitiveness. I mean, World Bank in the past used to lower us a very low score. I mean, more than 120 on ease of doing business. But recently, the government introduced the online business registration platforms where allowing the business people to register the business online, and it has been significantly reduced the numbers of time taken that used to be more than 3 months to get a business license, now reduced by 8 working days. So hopefully that maybe in the 2021, the index of the ease of doing business by the World Bank will be lower than 100. I mean, that is what we expected. I mean, the advancements of the digital technology is quite good, and it can transform almost every sector. And Cambodian also very least developed or other or being developed. We need to embrace those technologies and fine tune and utilize it. Whether how can we make this technology to contribute to our economy? Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Let's go to Mr. Chaudhary. Any last thoughts from you?
Thank you. Very quickly, 3 last thoughts. One is that as we embark on the frontier technologies, like what we have done in Bangladesh and what we've just heard from the governor, so using artificial intelligence with the big data that we have actually amassed from different telcos to understand where the disease is progressing and make important decisions. We also have to leverage older technology at the same time. For instance, how we leverage the old phone technology to provide emergency relief, to actually do new kind of e-commerce that we're calling phone commerce, P-commerce, because a lot of people did not have access or affordable access to the internet, or that did not have the digital skills, but they could actually go on the phone and actually order food and order emergency assistance. So I think we need to look at both frontier technology and repurposing of old technology. That's one. Second is a new look at data, and the data awareness and understanding in the policy circle that it is the new lifeblood for decision making, for real-time timely response, I think was heightened. And I think we need to make ourselves much more data ready and much more data aware. So that's one good realization that has come from the COVID dividend. And the third is public-private partnership. We used a lot of private data to make public decisions. Data that has come from hospitals, data that has come from the travel sector, data that has come from the telcos to make response in health, in social safety net. And in future, we'll actually be using a lot of this data to create digital credit and many other forms of new services. So that combination of public sector and private sector, and also academia, I think that collaboration, again, the need for that has been heightened within the COVID period. So those are the 3 things: combination of frontier and old technologies, a renewed focus on data, and public-private partnership in an unprecedented level are the 3 things that I have reflected. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. So I think we reached the end of our session today. This was a very good discussion. I'd like to thank our guests for participating in this dialogue. You brought clearly the voice of different IDA countries from different regions of the world. So thank you so much for sharing. And thank you to our host, and the experience from Korea has been extremely good and rich, and I'm sure there will be a lot of discussion around lessons highlighted in this session. So there is a saying of, let's not waste a good crisis. I think COVID is highlighted the importance of digital, highlighted the importance of moving forward and faster on the agenda. And I wish you all a good end of discussion after the session. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, Butena and the panelists of Session 1. It is exciting to see a diverse audience, including from IDA client countries, internal and external colleagues from the World Bank, as well as from Korea. Due to COVID-19, we are limited in size on site here, but the range and diversity of audience connected online enabled by technology is truly amazing. And that brings us to Session 2 on international partnerships on technology in the post-COVID-19 era. Let me introduce our moderator, Mr. Kyung-woo Ko, Senior Advisor at law firm Bae Kim & Lee, also formerly the Korean Ambassador to OECD. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Ho with a big round of applause. And let me also introduce our panelists. Please welcome Mr. Chi Woong-song, Vice President of Science and Technology Policy Institute. Mr. Hoon Sop-so, Special Representative and Country Manager of the World Bank Group Korea Office. And let me also introduce our panelists virtually connected with us. Mr. Hyung-gun Wang, Korea Green Growth Trust Fund Manager of the World Bank Group. Zaki Kuri, World Bank Senior Digital Development Specialist of the Digital Development Global Practice of World Bank. Mr. Sarao Wendelin Kibwe, Senior Advisor to the Executive Director at the World Bank, representing Tanzania. Over to you, Mr. He.
Hello. Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. And following the practice, good afternoon for those participating in the Washington, D.C. My name is Kyung-woo Ko, and it's a great honor and privilege to be a moderator for this session. We just had a wonderful discussion on the Session 1 about promises and challenges of the digital economy for IDA countries. And the Session 2 is about international partnership. More specifically, how the international community can help IDA countries handle these risks and challenges, as well as fulfill the promises of digital technology. All challenges come with opportunities, and COVID-19 can provide a good opportunity to make positive changes, to build back better by promoting digital, green, and more inclusive society. Through the keynote speech, we already heard that Korean New Deal policy is also based on these three poles: green, digital, and more sustainable society. And in that sense, Korea is in a unique position to share its insights and experiences with other countries. And also, Korea is a country that has learned and benefited tremendously from the international support and international cooperation during the rapid economic development. And in that sense, we value very highly of the importance of international cooperation, and particularly with the World Bank, and to support the developing countries. So such a partnership will be even more critical now with this ongoing pandemic to help other countries leverage the promise of technology and innovation of the digital age and to restore from this pandemic crisis and to put it in the more long-term growth path. So in this session, I hope we can share insights from such global partnerships on innovation and technology in the post-COVID-19 world. And I'm happy to be joined by 5 distinguished panelists from both the World Bank and Korean partner and IDA member. And let me introduce them very briefly. We have 5. The first is Mr. Ji-Hoon Song on my left, who is Vice President of Korea's STEPI, which is a government-funded research institute devoted to the R&D of science, technology, innovation policy in Korea. And Mr. Jae Kuri, a senior digital development specialist from the World Bank Group Korean office. Mr. Hyung-gun Wang, he's a program manager of Korea Green Growth Trust Fund, which is a task force which supports the mainstreaming of green growth in World Bank operations. And Mr. Jarao Kibwe, a senior advisor to executive director of the World Bank for covering Botswana, Burundi, and Eritrea. And finally, Mr. Hun Sahib Saw, who is special representative and country manager, World Bank Group Korea office. And Mr. Jae Kur, Mr. Hyung-gun Wang, and Mr. Jarao Kibwe will join us virtually. As for housekeeping, each panelist will introduce his point up to 6 to 7 minutes, and then we'll open up Q&A session if time permits. So let me invite my first panelist, Mr. Song, who will tell us how the Korean government promotes the country's innovation capabilities. So Mr. Song, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for kindly introducing me. Today, I'm going to talk about Korean innovation policy and also what kind of implication we can have for the global cooperation. And then I'd like to talk about a little bit more detailed cooperation measure between the World Bank and Korean partners. Okay. In my opinion, and maybe many other experts may agree with me, the Korean innovation system and Korea actually is kind of best practice of so-called national innovation system theory. The government, academia, research, and business have worked together very effectively and very successfully. The main role of government is to setting up the policy and planning and legislation. Actually, during the course of economic growth, social development, and S&T advance, government actually has done a great job and played a very critical role. As you can see this picture, in 1962, the government, specifically the Economic Planning Board, set up the 5-year technology promotion plan in 1962. On the basis of this plan, the Korean government has done the institutional building and the legislation and human resource development plan and everything. If you look at this slide, in 1962, the Korean government set up 20-year master plan for S&T development. In this plan, the Korean government ambitiously announced that they would increase the R&D investment among GDP more than 2.5%. So the government always set up and show the milestone and which way we have to go and how far we have to go and what kind of things we have to do together in order to achieve the goal. And always the S&T policies has been corresponding to national strategy and industrial policy. Let me talk about some institution building. In 1966, Korean government has established the KIST, Korea Institute of Science and Technology. And at the time, the GDP per capita in Korea less than $200, but the Korean government invested more than $9 million for one single research institute. It means that Korean government wants to signal that this government and this country is really think want to give more weight to the science and technology. So it's a quite big kind of movement at the time. And also Korean government Korean government to try to set up research institute at the same time. So we have more than 25 government research institute right now. And also the cluster. As you can see, Data Innopolis was established in 1970s, and the Data Innopolis provided technological service to the industrial complex, and all located in nationwide, and it contributed to the technological development in private sector. And also in 1967, the Korean government established the Ministry of Science and Technology. Virtually, it has been the first attempt by the market economy country. And also, the Korean government has utilized some kind of scholarship program in attracting the best of the best high school students into the engineering program and science program. It means that the country, the Korea, was successfully mobilized the best of the best people into the science and technology and innovation. And also in 1982, Korean government set up the specific national R&D programs. At this point, from this point, the Korean government look at the highest end of the technology, means that high-tech country and more advanced countries. It's a direction of a new investment. The business sector, the private sector responded very well. Also, at this moment, the more than 80%, almost 80% of R&D investment that comes from the private sector. Means that Samsung, Hyundai, LG, and SK, they not only produce the goods, and they not only receive the technology from the public sector, they themselves invest on technology development and R&D, and they were able to achieve very technological advances, and now they have very good competitiveness in the global market. And at the same time, the Korean government tried to change the social perspective on science and technology. As we all know, Korea has very strong tradition of Confucianism. In Confucianism, the engineering, the manufacturing did not get the important recognition. But after that, the Korean government changed the social perspectives. So people think that engineers are very good. The science and technology is very important. So culture, social perspective change is very important one. When we visit our partner countries, our partners in the government of our partner countries, they always said that it's not easy to the best of the best people into the engineering sector, science and technology. Then we have to change that kind of social perspectives. This picture shows the Korean New Deal. It's maybe more focused on digital New Deal. The Korean government proposed three kind of measures: the DNA infrastructure, the untapped business, and associate digitalization. So it's kind of an everything. As always, we have done, the government to set up the goal, the proposed policy, and maybe the private sector will follow up. Now, what kind of implication we can provide to our partner countries, especially IDA? Policy is very important one. So in many cases, our partner countries just receive the policy set up by others, other advanced country, and maybe a World Bank and UN. But we think that our partner countries should have acquired the policy-making capability at first. So we'd like to work together. And also at the same time, knowledge production is very important. So how to build up the R&D sector is very critical. And next one, the business is so important. If we can groom the human resources, then where they can go, the industry is very important one. The last one, global cooperation. The Korea was able to achieve those kind of great advances on the basis of global cooperation with the USA, Japan, and major European countries, and recently with China. Okay, what we can do together, the World Bank, for example, the STEPI is a policy research institute. We can work with World Bank. We can participate in the development cooperation project. And also SNU, Seoul National University, they will provide the higher education program, human resource development. The World Bank, STEPI, and SNU, higher education and the multilateral organization and policy research institute, we can do many things in my opinion. And now Korean government more invest on the digital technology, 5G, 6G, AI, and big data. So I hope that this will increase, they will improve the technological capability of Korea much more, and we can share our experience with our partner countries. I'm sorry for telling more details about our system and policy due to the time limitation. Thank you for listening to my remarks. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Song. I remember that in my days at the OECD, Korea's R&D budget was around 4.5% of the GDP, and that's the top record among all the OECD countries. And thanks for the nice introduction about the Korean national innovation system. Next, I invited Jackie, who, digital technology are now at the forefront of development and provide a unique opportunity for countries to accelerate economic growth. And Jackie will introduce the example of innovation technology for development and the bank's approach to innovation. Mr. Jackie, please.
Many thanks, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts with you today. It's fascinating what you just mentioned about the 3% of GDP. I guess right now the target is to reach 1%, which is the ceiling that that the digital cooperation is trying really to push hard in order to achieve. So it's another evidence how Korea is really setting a good example for the others. So with this, let me start. I have 3 points to highlight here. Just starting as usual with the overwhelming of the crisis that is happening, just in order really to see some lights out of it. I will zoom into a few areas deeper a little bit that is related also to the priorities of the World Bank, but also what we heard today from the New Deal. And then ending with, let's say, a kind of recommendation how to move forward together, basically. So it's very quickly, the pandemic was and still overwhelming, but there is one thing that is clear: digital is appearing to be the hidden hero here. Why? Because we're seeing more and more, I would say, mainstreaming of digital. We are seeing the contribution of digital in the healthcare, the improving of the service delivery, the social safety net that has been delivered through digital payments, and the remote education that helped really to bring back children into their schools and their learning cycle. So it's obviously this has propelled what we tried really to accelerate for a few years right now in terms of digital transformation. Let me close on this point by saying that always a crisis usually leads to innovation because of three things. One is it brings us together with a common purpose to get out of this crisis. We see a world that is different. Right now, we are more comfortable to the virtual world, and the proof of this is the virtual conference that we are hosting today. Usually, we should be face-to-face, but in a completely different locations, we are still communicating together and trying really to share our thoughts. And there is also the push or or what the crisis already forced us in order to be an action-oriented, trying really to build better, trying really to move forward, trying to create new products, new goods, innovative way of delivering on the models, the business models that we're having. And this will be accelerated, let's say, like what we saw from session one, that is percolating not only within the developed nation, but also within the developing countries. One thing is really clear also, other than the digital, is that the impact on vulnerable population is a little bit, or let's say, has been reinforced by what we are seeing so far. It's not a secret that only in least developing countries, less than 20%, they do use internet, they do have access to broadband, comparing to almost an average of 86 or even more in developed countries. In Africa, only 28% they do have regular usage of the internet and the broadband, even less in the broadband. In Asia Pacific, it's still less than 50%. Those numbers are again reinforcing the idea of prioritizing connectivity, safe and affordable connectivity through broadband. But let me zoom into another three areas, which echoing a little bit the Korea New Deal. Number one is basically, I would name it or label it as the digital infrastructure for the future. What in Korea are really capturing it by the DNA. I see it as really the digital infrastructure for the future, where investment, new business model for the development, deployment, and pushing the bar high can really be the way forward. I'm talking here about the lack of data infrastructure. And I will give you at least two numbers that we are seeing so far. In terms of data centers, there is only 66, I would say, data center tier 3 or tier 4 in the whole continent of Africa, comparing to just in the US above 2,000 tier 3, tier 4, which is basically letting us really see the real picture of how it is. If I go to Europe, it's almost 1,300 data center, which has the security and the capacity to deliver T3, T4 data center. This is really the magnitude of the opportunity in order really to capture the data era that we are looking for. There is also I would say, a huge gap in terms of digital capabilities when it is coming to cybersecurity, which is a cross-cutting to the critical infrastructure of the future, either on the 5G networks or even on the regular broadband that we are seeing here, or on the data infrastructure. This is something that we cannot really wait in order to address it through our partnership with the IDA 19. And finally, I would like really to praise the push that we are seeing about creating data commons by promoting the policy for open data, open AI models, open source software, even open content, which is really fundamental to the collaboration in order really to bring a value to the digital infrastructure of the future. With this, I would say and highlight that we need also policies and regulations that will allow us to have the appropriate safeguards that are bringing privacy by design, across the whole medium, safeguards that is allowing an open and fair e-trade that is really leveraging the platforms that are coming together. It's also allowing to safeguard and have trust into the data sharing flows that we are really establishing together. Let me go to the second point, which is basically I see it as not only as a foundation, but also as an enabler. And here is basically, I would like to highlight the fast pace of digital transformation when it is coming really to the public sector performance. I'm talking here about the national and subnational levels, even the city levels. So what is really behind the idea of pushing smart cities? We need to go one step a little bit before and try really to put some fundamentals there. And the fundamentals are new capacities for government to adapt to the new digital environment in the post-COVID era. I'm talking here about a drive that we need to shift not just from public service delivery through an e-government or even a digital government that is creating more participation. I'm talking here about really a smart government that is fostering more open, participatory, and innovative approach towards delivering the services and even predicting them. I see the digital cooperation that can happen globally or even with a solid partner like Korea into 5 areas. And I guess a country like Korea, where it has been leading into this field for almost a decade right now, can really help enormously there. And the 5 areas I would say is that how the design is, how the routing of digital transformation is embedded into creating this smart government, the smart public administration, smart city issue. So it's digital by design. Citizen is always and should be the center. So how really to listen to the users' need, how to capture their needs by the different digital tools, but also about the process that has been established and we can learn from it. The data-driven administration that needs to be there in terms of using the data as key strategic asset, but also how to be proactive, like what we saw the agility of the Korean government in responding very quickly and adjusting to the crisis by anticipating the needs and the delivery process of the service. And finally, again, I reinforce the idea of open by default. My third and last point is really about the leapfrogging. We cannot, even in either countries, they do have the right to also access the technology that will help these countries to leapfrog with their development. I'm talking here about definitely not just the emerging technology as a whole, but specifically about AI. And I'm talking here about general AI that can augment really the productivity, augment the intelligence of the systems and the decision-making process. It is a general purpose technology, which is have a broad spectrum of application in nearly every industry. It's bringing its own benefits, but also it's bringing some risks that needs to be addressed. And I will go quickly here on them in terms of inequality. So we need to have smart talents that is enabling really to stop any bias within the development of the algorithms, regulation that are agile, in order really to stop any control and allow competition across within the industry culture clusters, and also the security that is allowing us to maintain a safe and trustworthy basically use and adoption of AI. So where really digital collaboration can help in order really to scale the adoption and the usage of trustworthy and responsible AI, about 3 buckets. One is basically the fundamentals. And the fundamentals here is the investment, the agile regulation, the enabling policy to secure access to data, the institutional capabilities to govern AI and the usage of AI, the principles that needs to be set there in order really to have the trustworthy environment. The recent strategy, national strategy of AI in Korea is a fantastic model that has been adopted finally after many years of consultation last December. And it could be one of the great model for how we can expand the talent pool and the development of the talent pool, the R&D, and how private sector is extremely a partner, a fundamental partner of the R&D, where 60% of the investment is there from private sector, and also on the entrepreneurship ecosystem that is coming strong and fast and in an ecosystem approach. Definitely on the usage are there. So with concluding, I would say that what we need is really digital collaboration that can basically brought another P to the 3 Ps that we saw during the first presentation. The P is about partnering that is embedded into the protecting and preserving and preparing for the era. Yes.
Okay, I think we are running out of time, so can you please conclude
so that's it. So basically, please remember the 4th P that will be embedded into the 3 Ps for partnering with the IDA countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackie. You covered a lot of ground, but to put it very simply, go digital. That's, I think, your message. And another important direction for the post-COVID recovery is go green. So let me invite Dr. Wang from the World Bank. He's now working at the as a manager for Korea Green Growth Trust Fund. And he'll share his experience about Korea's partnership with the World Bank on green innovation. Dr. Wang, please.
Thank you very much, the Kyung-Woo. It's great to meet you again in person, this time with virtual one. Let me share my PowerPoint and start communications. Organizer, can you allow me share my PowerPoint? Well, you can share my PowerPoint in the upfront, then I will ask you to skip the slide. The other way is fine with me. I think we have a technical difficulty, but because of time saving, I'll proceed my presentations. Thank you. So first of all, good morning and good afternoon. Good evening. My name is Hyung-Gun Wang. As the Kyung-Woo kindly introduced me, I'm the program manager of Korea Green Growth Trust Fund. It's a great honor to present here. Wish that I can present next time in person in Korea. So first of all, I want to introduce our Korea Green Growth Trust Fund. It was established in 2011 with the partnership on green growth between the government of Korea and the World Bank to promote green growth. As you can see, the green growth agenda is really critical in many ways, but also our Korea Green Growth Trust Fund program aims to support and operationalize green growth in action at the World Bank. And we are currently, thank you very much for sharing the PowerPoint. So yeah, this one, thank you. So After operations from 2013, we provided grant support to 144 World Bank projects, a total of $88 million. Because of green growth, we are promoting multi-sectoral and holistic engagement. We are working with 7 sectoral teams at the World Bank, including urban, agriculture, environment, water, transport, digital development, and energies. Also, we are working with the IFC, which is in charge of the private investment. Next slide. We just want to highlight the visionary partnership, which started for 10 years ago, basically from 2011. I'll explain why I call it visionary partnership. Also, the Korea's visionary leadership in green growth, implementing green growth initiative by policy investment, also the technological innovations, inspired many developing countries around the world. More importantly, Korea accumulated green growth knowledge and practices over 10 years. That is a really important asset World Bank we want to disseminate further with our World Bank client. Under this partnership, Korea Green Growth Trust Fund has strengthened and expanded World Bank's green growth portfolio, utilizing the, as mentioned, 10 years of the Korea's green growth experience in terms of policy, investment, and also the cutting-edge kind of innovative technologies. Next slide. In our effort, KGTF is highly valued for our support for new methodologies and technologies, also innovative investment approaches, also facilitating knowledge sharing with Korea, also around the world. Currently, roughly 80% of KGTF grant is related to technology or having the innovative technology component. Also, as mentioned, KGTF is promoting transformative and multi-sectoral project. As mentioned to you, that green growth is not only one sector. We need a lot of interactions in terms of policy, investment, technologies, and also you need to work with the different sectors. In essence, our Korean Green Growth Trust Fund is fostering, piloting, and upscaling innovative technologies, which was already experimented in Korea, also around the world. Next slide. This is a quick snapshot of how our KGTF program is working with the different sectors at the World Bank, basically connecting, integrating various sectoral solutions or teams together into the green growth path. Next slide. So I mentioned in the beginning that the visionary partnership, also the visionary Korean government green growth initiative. The reason is that actually Korea embarked green growth development path in the midst, also in response to global financial crisis in 2008. And a lot of investment shifted toward the green economy. Also, various policies and technological innovations are aligned to develop, making the economy greener. This accumulated information will be really important asset for COVID-19. As you already hear today, that Korean government recently announced the Korean Green New Deal in response to COVID-19. And also Korea is again positioned as the global leader in terms of addressing global financial crisis over COVID-19 pandemic crisis for the remodeling or rebuilding economy greener or more sustainable ways. The COVID-19 crisis will be the wake-up call for many global communities. But as KGTF, we worked over 10 years to disseminating and promoting green growth innovation in the World Bank project. Also, we are working closely with the Korean government, also various experts or stakeholders in Korea to promote or sharing green growth knowledges. I think in this regard, KGTF will be well positioned in addressing the new agenda of the World Bank to basically rebuilding economies in post-COVID-19. Next slide. This is my last slide. In response to COVID-19 crisis, our KJT program will be aligned with new World Bank strategic priorities, which is articulated in the COVID-19 crisis response approach paper. It was published last June. And we are working closely with the various World Bank teams. As mentioned, we are working with the 7 sectoral groups and also all regions in partnership with Korea, also global platforms. And also we are adopting targeted approaches, basically addressing the need of the demand of our client. And more importantly, we want to promote tailored solutions, which draw on the best practices, also the kind of innovative technologies from Korea and around the world. In essence, our priority in response to COVID-19 will be 3 things. First, we want to promote integration of great groundbreaking technologies. Second, investment in the innovative approaches. Third, facilitation of learning from Korea and around the world. Key main message will be that Korea already implemented green growth innovations for last 10 years. The lessons or knowledge accumulated through this experience can be shared to global communities through the Korea Green Growth Trust Fund programs. Thank you. Let me stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. We are a little bit behind in our time schedule. So without any delay, let me invite Mr. Jarao Kibwe. He will share Africa perspective on innovation and technology. Please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ho. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. I would like to start by commending the government of South Korea and IDA for organizing and inviting me to this timely workshop. As we are all aware, digital transformation, it creates both opportunities and the challenges that transcend borders. In this case, international cooperation on technology is more important than ever. I would also like to join previous speakers in expressing our gratitude to the government of Korea for its generous contribution to the IDA-19 replenishment, as well as past replenishments. While it may not be possible to take account of all what IDA has done to our countries, it suffices to say that since March, IDA has been a lifeline for countries to respond to the impact of COVID-19, and it continues to do so. However, despite the health crisis, the most challenging phase now is how to support economic crisis in African countries. And I think this is the area where international partnership is really needed. I'm therefore happy that I consider this workshop as part of the international efforts to address this very challenge and ensure no IDA country is left behind. IDA countries are also pleased to note that harnessing technology is at the core of the World Bank 3 stages of crisis response, which includes relief, restructuring, and the resilience recovery. The COVID-19 pandemic has revealed a need to enhance coordination of international efforts in order to leverage the benefit of digital age and manage its potential risks. It has also made evidence that jobs of the future are closer than most of us thought before the pandemic. To this end, the pandemic-accelerated digital revolution has the potential to help IDA countries speed up recovery and the progress towards SDG, which are unfortunately at the risk of being not to be met. This would, however, require forging an international partnership on technology, I think, in 2 ways. First, I believe IDA can play a facilitating role in helping its client countries accelerate innovation and embrace digital technology through the IDA Jobs and Economic Transformation special theme. However, for IDA to be able to do this, I think more resources will be needed beyond what was agreed in December last year. Second, IDA countries have a lot to learn from South Korea, as we have learned from the deputy minister and the directors. not as an IDA graduate, but also as a technology frontier. In this regard, I think it's important to deepen South-South cooperation that will further open opportunities for technology transfer as well as exchange of knowledge. Building resilience of the post-pandemic world will depend on how governments and businesses embrace digital technology. To this effect, mainstreaming innovation in digital technology in the post-pandemic world is no longer an option, but a necessity. We have some encouraging news, I think, from Africa that contrary to previous technological advancements, I think some countries in Africa, particularly those in East Africa, are actively involved in the digital revolution. However, the pace of digital transformation underscores the need for IDA to support this country to rapidly embrace innovation and digital technology if they are to thrive, not to survive in the post-pandemic world. Finally, international cooperation is critical to ensuring that accelerated adoption of technology does not lead to widening productivity gap, erosion of social cohesion, and trust of institutions. Furthermore, greater international cooperation is also instrumental to minimizing digital divides within and between countries. I would like to conclude by saying that IDA countries count on the support of Korea and IDA to cross this long bridge of pandemic to the post-pandemic world that leaves no one behind and that works for everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eng.Ver. And finally, our final panelist will be Mr. Hoon Saip-So, who is a mastermind behind this seminar. He'll talk about World Bank-Korea partnership on innovation and technology. Mr. So, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me first start off by thanking Korea's Ministry of Economy and Finance, who are a major sponsor of the Korea office itself and also today's workshop, and an important joint partner for the World Bank on the digital agenda for IDA countries. So I'll be very brief. I just want to make a general point and talk a little bit more specifically about the Korea office. The general point is, I think we all recognize the importance of the digital agenda for IDA countries. For the World Bank, we have what we call a disruptive technology agenda, and this is a core mandate for the World Bank, and it is because we recognize that technology is essentially transforming the development agenda and creating new paths for development, and we need to, as an international institution, help developing countries take advantage of these transformative opportunities, but also help the same countries manage the risk. And I think some of our colleagues talked about some of the risk. Zaki, for instance, mentioned the risk of digital divide, that less than 20% of developing countries have access to the internet. In addition, about 35 to 40% have some access to the internet, but they're at the very early stages of developing their digital economy. So there are huge opportunities and risk, and the risk is that these countries will be left behind. Within the countries, I think there are also concerns about those who have the skills to be able to access digital technology and to benefit from digital technology, and those who do not, similar to the divide between the poor and the rich. And I think the World Bank's agenda compels us to also address such digital divides. And those inequalities have come up even more strongly as a result of the pandemic. For instance, lower income countries compared to middle and upper income countries, they have more jobs that are impacted by the pandemic, in the sense that there are more jobs that require in-person interactions, and therefore they are more negatively impacted by the pandemic. So, and therefore these are the kind of jobs that also have the opportunities of being replaced, let's say, by automation or use of technology. And again, then the issue becomes, how do we help those people with lower skills to benefit from technology. And this touches on the impact of labor market that some people are concerned about, that is called the labor market polarization. So what we are seeing is that in some countries that the highly skilled are benefiting, of course, from the spread of technology. But what's also happening is the middle skilled people are unable to move up necessarily to the higher skilled positions. And they're, by necessity, being pushed into lower skill, lower paid occupations. So this is creating job market polarization and also, I think, potential to exacerbate inequality in societies and countries. So this is a very important agenda for us. Now let me shift a little bit and talk about the World Bank Group Office. As many of you heard today, the World Bank Group Office is now a global hub on innovation and technology for sustainable development. Again, linking to the general point about the importance of disruptive technology, the office now will help the World Bank in developing countries promote disruptive technologies and also help countries manage the risk of disruptive technologies. Now the question is, why Korea? Well, as everyone here probably realize or recognize, Korea has had a fantastic, spectacular growth performance. And as a result, it's a sought-after case model and case study for a lot of our developing country counterparts. And I think one of the reasons why is, especially if you look at how Korea transitioned from middle to high-income country, it was able to do this because it took advantage of innovation and technology. And this is why we think that the Korea office is an ideal location for the World Bank to be a center of excellence for innovation and technology, because we have many partners here who are interested in working with us, working on development. Also, many partners who are very good at understanding and utilizing and leveraging innovation and technology. So we have both the demand from our clients for learning about and adopting and expanding innovation and technology, and we have the supply here in terms of partners who have the expertise and interest in working with us. And already we're working in many of these areas. For instance, in the Korea office, we have the energy team that works on energy efficiency and renewable energies. We have an urban team that works on digital spatial technology. We have an environment team that works on using technology to control pollutions, to better manage forestry, to better manage solid waste management. All of these projects we work with Korean partners to help developing countries. And they all use innovation technology, and they're also all about the green sustainable agenda. So I think this is the future of the office, and I'm very glad to say that we have strong partnerships on the ground here, especially with the Ministry of Economy and Finance and with many of you here, and this is why we invited many of you here to attend today's workshop. And I look forward to continuing and expanding these partnerships in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. So. Original plan is to have a little time for Q&A, but because everybody was so enthusiastic to share his perspective, so I failed miserably in managing the time, but judging by their passion and enthusiasm, I think there's a very good potential for international cooperation. Session 1 was about the promise and challenges, about the innovation and digital technology, and session 2 is about basically international cooperation to make it happen and manage the risks and challenges. And I think we can all agree that international community has a great potential despite this big gap in the digital infrastructure between developed countries and some other countries. But conversely, it can also provide a good opportunity to leapfrog the development and build back better by going digital, go green, and as well as to a more inclusive development. And I'm very happy to say that among all these discussions, Korea is very in a unique position in that effort, in the sense that Korea's development path itself is a good testament and evidence of how innovation and technology can help the country grow and particularly with its new and policy drive called New Deal. Korea is in a very unique position to share its experience as well as policy insights with the international community, and particularly in the context of the IDA-19, and particularly with the cooperation with the World Bank and with the World Bank office in Seoul here. So let me conclude this, and let me invite you all to give a good applause for all the panelists here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ho and the panel members of Session 2. We're nearing the end of the workshop, and at this time, I would like to introduce Martin Reiser, World Bank Country Director for China, Korea, and Mongolia, as well as Samuel Munzele Maimbo, Director of IDA Mobilization and IBRD Corporate Finance, for our closing remarks. Martin, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, together with my colleague Samuel, I'd like to bring the IDA Korea workshop on innovation and digital technology in the post-pandemic world to a successful conclusion. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to attend the workshop. This workshop is being held in virtual form, but I hope the debates and discussions were useful. I would especially like to thank our speakers and panelists for sharing their views and guiding the discussions on leveraging innovation and digital technologies in IDA countries. Today, we discussed the enormous potential of leveraging innovation and technology for development and its added importance in the post-COVID-19 world. We heard from various participants about their country's efforts to leverage innovation and technology during the COVID-19 recovery. We were inspired by the presentation of Korea's New Deal that combines digital and green innovation and expansion of social protection to build back better. The panel's debates highlighted the importance of digital infrastructure, digital government, and the need to promote inclusive growth in the digital economy. They also highlighted the risks that the digital divide, if left unaddressed, could widen inequality both across and within countries. All of us emphasized the importance of international partnerships to help developing countries close the digital divide, improve their regulatory frameworks, and boost investment in skills in order to leverage technology for development. Ladies and gentlemen, Korea is one of the critical international partners for the World Bank, and the World Bank Group Korea office will continue to be central to this partnership. The World Bank Group Korea office has the focus on innovation and technology and green growth, and hence is particularly well suited to co-host the discussions today. Through the World Bank Group Korea office, we hope to share Korea's experiences on how to harness innovation and technology during the COVID-19 recovery and for sustainable and inclusive development over the long term. We hope to leverage this partnership to support the IDA-19 technology agenda. Now, let me turn over the mic to my colleague, IDA Mobilization and IBRD Corporate Finance Director, Samuel Munzele Maimbo, for his final remarks. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Martin. That was an excellent summary of what has been a fascinating 3 hours that I've thoroughly enjoyed. It's been a real pleasure to listen to this engaging discussion on innovation and digital technology. I've been truly impressed with the clarity, depth, and scope of the strategies that we have heard about, especially from our counterparts, our colleagues in Korea. And it's been a pleasure to work with you in organizing this event and sharing this knowledge. Allow me to say a few words in closing. As many of the speakers have said today, innovation and accessible digital technologies have the potential to not only unlock development, but also provide us all a pathway towards a post-crisis recovery that will ensure that we build back to a more sustainable environment than we did prior to the crisis. The one thing about the pandemic is that it has created new opportunities to leverage technology. And it has highlighted the role that digital technologies can have in our lives in many different ways. I've been impressed with the way we've discussed accessible digital technology and options for accelerating its usage. Because not only does technology expose the inevitable inequalities in many communities, it also gives us an opportunity or a tool to close those inequalities in a very effective way. Let me highlight that as many of the speakers today, when many of the speakers today made reference to IDA countries, there is an acknowledgement, and this is something that we discussed at the recent annual meetings, that IDA countries have been severely impacted by the crisis. My own country, Zambia, is being heavily weighted down by the crisis and its impact. They're facing fiscal constraints. They'll endure delays in infrastructure investments, and the digital divide that has provided a sustainable path for many other countries will only continue to grow. This has significant long-lasting implications for human capital development, for education, for health, and many of the things that we take for granted in some countries. So this discussion is not only timely, it is highly appropriate as we discuss how we respond to the COVID-19 crisis in a lot of IDA countries. The IDA 19 agenda, which was finalized before the COVID crisis, had a strong focus on supporting countries adopt promising, inclusive, and transformative technologies. And I'm really pleased that that was done, and it was quite fortuitous. This workshop gives us an opportunity to build on that foundation that was laid, to take advantage of Korea's experience and that of other countries that we learned today. Because as we grapple with this pandemic, it's important that we do not lose sight of the long-term opportunities for growth that this technology presents us. Today's discussion has emphasized the importance of digital technology, and more importantly for me, in my current role, the opportunity for knowledge transfer between countries. The Korean New Deal, which I paid great attention throughout the session, is a great example of how IDA countries can promote a more digital, green, and sustainable recovery. I was very interested in Aki's remarks at the beginning of the session that traced Korea's own path towards the developed economy that it is today. And I think we will continue to look for opportunities for Korea to share its experiences for countries that are following in its path. IDA countries are looking to us, participants today, the World Bank and the government in Korea, to help them leapfrog the hurdles that they face. And I hope that this event is the beginning of a platform for Korea knowledge transfer and exchange between IDA countries and developed countries like Korea. And to this end, I am really excited about the prospects of using the strong partnership that our office in Korea has developed with you in making that happen. And thus, as I close, on behalf of the IDA team, I'd like to sincerely thank all of our panelists, all of our guests for joining this unique workshop organized under the new normal, where on-site and virtual must come together so that we continue to hold these important conversations. Lastly, but certainly not the least, I'd like to thank Korea's Ministry of Economy and Finance and my colleagues at the World Bank who worked together as one seamless team to organize this event. I'd like to thank the East Asian and Pacific Vice Presidency and her office, and in particular the World Bank office in Korea, my colleagues in DFI and the Digital Development Global Practice that all came together to make this event happen as seamlessly as we've experienced it today. And for that, I'm personally grateful, and on behalf of the World Bank, truly appreciative of what we've discussed today. With those words, let me thank you all for joining us today and wish you all a good day and a good night, and look forward to future conversations such as this. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a great honor and a pleasure hosting you at the IDA Korea workshop on innovation and digital technology in the post-pandemic world. Thank you for joining us here in Seoul today and over the virtual space. I wish you all a great rest of the day, and for some of you, good night. Thank you.